I'm waiting.
Start early.
All right, come on, change it. 7:30, we're on. Hi, I'm Toby Chapman. I'm the junior program director of Squirrel Hill Historical Society. We're going to do without a lot of the pleasantries before beginning the program, but first Tony and Davida is going to talk about the O'Neill House.
Just very brief. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we are getting close to having a tentative opening of the new log house. Tentatively October 19th, there'll be a banner on the homepage of our website. Members will get an announcement, email, but you might be looking there. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's actually, we're calling it a soft opening, but we are finally going to open it.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. Next week's presentation will be on Dragon's Den, which is a nonprofit that works in Homewood, and that will be all the pleasantries that we have tonight. Are going to go right into our program, and unfortunately, Ivonne Smith-Tapia has young children, and they came home with something, and she has something. However, she was able to get her boss to come in, Dana Gold. Dana is the Chief Operating Officer of Jewish Family and Community Services. And let's see, she sent me biographical information. She refers to her as a nonprofit serial entrepreneur. She started her career in a food pantry, went on to open halfway houses for men, women, and children struggling with homelessness. In 2007, at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis in South Africa, Dana developed a video mentoring program for teens living in child-headed households. She's currently, as I said, the CEO of Jewish Family Community Services. This is a nonprofit that welcomes refugees, provides legal help to immigrants, lowers barriers for job seekers, and is a resource for food, counseling, and youth programs for thousands of people each year. She's also the creator of Broke the Game, a board game that helps develop empathy for individuals struggling to overcome the poverty cycle. Dana, please, cheers.
I was instructed on how to turn on the mic first and to speak into it. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. But I am Dana Gold, and I am here today, and I'm sorry that Ivonne couldn't be here. She was very much eager to be here and speak with you all and share the work that we do specifically around immigrants and refugees within one department of JF&CS. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, first of all, about what JF&CS does. JF&CS has 7 different service areas, and we have been around since 1937 and doing refugee resettlement the entire time. So we started refugee resettlement World War II, bringing Jews from Europe during that time, and we have continued ever since then, and now resettle from people from all around the world. It's humbling work. But in addition to that work, we are doing counseling services. So we provide psychological services for individuals who are struggling emotionally. We have an emphasis and a specific expertise in trauma. Particularly around the synagogue shooting. We were a big first responder in the work there. We also work with thousands of older adults within our region through AgeWell Pittsburgh, which is a collaboration between the JCC, the JAA, and JF&CS. And then we also do guardianship services. We're actually guardians for individuals who have been deemed by the courts as unable to take care of themselves and make their own decisions about their health and their finances. A lot of individuals who are formerly homeless, and we're the actual guardians for about 180 different individuals who we consider our family. We do immigration legal services, so we represent and help find pathways to citizenship for about 2,000 individuals every year. And this is everything from helping people get employment authorization to helping people get citizenship. And we're really excited with our team of about 30 lawyers and paralegals that do all that important work. I'm going to save the refugee and immigrant services to last because that's what we're here to talk about tonight. The senior services I touched upon, we're also the organization that is your friendly neighborhood food pantry. So the JF&CS Squirrel Hill Food Pantry is also work that we do. We serve about 1,500 people every year who are food insecure and have other barriers to maintaining their house or maintaining the lights being turned on, the utilities, and we work with a wide variety of people with a wide variety of needs there. We focus on halal, kosher, and gluten-free diets, and also culturally respectful food, because not all of us eat the same food depending on where we come from. To some people, not having avocados is to us like not having morning cereal, right? So we have to accommodate everyone's needs. And then we have our career services. JF&CS Career Services works with almost 2,000 job seekers every year. We help people find employment where they can use their skills, talents, and abilities. And we do this for people with high barriers to employment, whether they be because we're on the older age of the age spectrum, or we have visible or invisible disabilities, or we may not speak the language, or we may have cultural barriers. So all of those things are things we work to help people overcome so that they can share their skills, talents with the world. And then most recently we developed our JF&CS Youth Services. Youth Services, which now is housed just down the block from Alderdice High School in the old forward bowling lanes. How many of you have bowled in the forward bowling lanes? Well now, if you can reimagine that space as bright and beautiful and full of high school aged youth after school. And there they get career services. They also are able to speak with a therapist through our Upstreet program, which is a barrier-free mental health services for youth between the ages of 12 and 22, where they can drop in after school and talk to a therapist, or they can drop in online and speak with a therapist right through their phone. And we also have after-school programs for all the newly arrived refugee youth to help them acclimatize to their new homes, to understand the system of school, to help them practice English, and we give them mentors who visit them in their homes. So JF&CS is about 150 employees, and we serve about 10,000 people every year through all this variety of work. And Squirrel Hill has been our home the whole time, and we've been so supported by the community here, both in terms of donations to the food pantry, volunteer hours, driving people, older adults, to doctor's appointments, or working with refugees, setting up new homes, helping them learn English. And so that's the work we're going to talk about tonight, is our work within the Refugee and Immigrant Services Department. So as you see, we have worked with people escaping persecution during World War II since 1937. This is an actual picture of one of our staff with the NCJW President Carol Leibovitz, who was actually working with refugees from Soviet Jews who'd been resettled here in the Pittsburgh area. The work that we do is historical and important. If you look at the timeline of people who have arrived here, we start looking at different kinds of conflicts around the world. Disruptions around the world result in displaced persons, and displaced persons can become refugees, and refugees are resettled all over the world. So the World War II, 1945 to 1979, we saw refugees coming from all over the world, conflicts in Iraq, Somalia, Bhutan in 2000 left us with other people from that region, those regions of the world. And most recently, conflicts in Syria and Colombia resulted in lots of Syrian refugees and people coming from Colombia as well. So where you see, for instance, most recently, the collapse of the work that the United States was trying to do in Afghanistan resulted once again in upheaval and the arrival of people from Afghanistan to our region. Congo, another big region of conflict that's been going on for a very long time. We have a lot of people from Congo who are currently here as refugees. We depend on the federal government and the federal government's policies to know who's coming to our region, right? Who's going to be resettled, because the US government makes that decision. And they also do the funding. We at JF&CS are an affiliate of HIAS. HIAS is one of 10 different voluntary organizations that the US government contracts with to bring refugees from around the world. This system has been in place for a very long time. We just added a 10th voluntary organization, Bethany Christian Services, now is a national organization resettling. But HIAS is one of the smallest and one of the oldest, and JF&CS is actually an affiliate of one of the affiliates that HIAS will contract, bring people over, and then place refugees around the United States through their affiliates, JF&CS being one of them.
Would you mention what HIAS stands for?
HIAS stands for the Hebrew Immigration Assistance Society. We don't use that name anymore, we just say HIAS. But it is notable that the synagogue shooting was in part because of the HIAS refugee Shabbats that are celebrated across the United States. Tree of Life was one of the synagogues that had, just the week prior to the shooting, hosted one of our staff who was there talking about the work of refugee resettlement. And that was the reason why that the perpetrator chose that synagogue, unfortunately. It's part of our work, it's part of our life, it's part of the fabric of what happened in Squirrel Hill, and it's part of our identity now. And JF&CS holds part of that as well with us all. So refugee admission ceilings are set by the president. So every new administration and every year, the president chooses a goal, a ceiling for how many refugees are brought to the United States. So Ronald Reagan, between 1981 and 1989, the ceilings were maxed out at about 90,000 people annually. Those individuals who were brought during that era were from Vietnam. Do you remember that? Yeah, I was a member of a community where a lot of Vietnamese refugees were resettled. Soviet Jews as well as Cuban refugees. So you can kind of see in some ways the political slant that Ronald Reagan, in his choice in resettlement, who was being brought here. And then George Bush continued a high refugee ceiling, very high. And this is interesting, these are both Republican presidents, but George Bush was 110,000, so he actually increased it and addressed the refugees from the Gulf War as well as from the collapse of the Soviet Union. So you can see once again that this is changing every year. And it's also something that changed dramatically between the Trump administration and then currently with the Biden administration, and who knows what's going to happen next. So every year we are told what's the goal, and then we either experience a lot of people coming or very few people coming. So we never know what's going to happen, quite frankly. But it's important for us to understand who we're talking about. When I first came to JF&CS 8 years ago, I interchangeably used the words refugees and immigrants. Big mistake. They put me in my place immediately. They're going, no, 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 no. There's a big difference. And so I want to talk to you about that for just a few minutes so that we're all on the same page. An immigrant, who we hear about in the news a lot, immigrants are, there's no really internationally accepted legal definition of what an immigrant is. We're also referred to as migrants. People staying outside of their country of origin who are not asylum seekers or refugees. So these are individuals who've left their country and moved. It could be that you came from Great Britain, the UK. Could be that you came from, Spain. Could be that you came from Argentina. But you have chosen to leave your country. Not for asylum, not brought here as a refugee. And so that's one specific category of people. Internally displaced individuals. So that would mean that if there was something that was happening here or what happened in Katrina, with Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, right? Those individuals who fled could be determined as internally displaced because they left an area of conflict or disaster and they moved somewhere else within their country, okay? So most people who are forced to flee never cross an international border. They try to stay. If you were being forced to leave, would you, from Katrina, would you move to Canada or Mexico, or would you move to Pittsburgh? I moved to Pittsburgh, right? It's much easier. So that's the internally displaced. Lots of times they're referred to as IDPs, and they account for 58% of those individuals who are forcibly displaced. So that's 117.3 million individuals currently across the globe. Now, asylum seekers are another whole category. An asylum seeker is a person who has left their country and is seeking protection. And they're looking for protection from persecution and very serious human rights violations. So they haven't yet been recognized legally by any governing body as a refugee, but they know themselves it is no longer safe for them to stay within their country. So they decide to leave, and they want to be legally recognized as a refugee, and they're waiting to receive that decision through asylum. So then when we hear about people crossing from the southern border seeking asylum, these are individuals who do not feel safe within their own country because of persecution and civil rights violations. Okay? And they are coming here and they're saying, I am a refugee. I want you to recognize me as a refugee through the process of asylum. And at this point, this means really, asylum is a human right. This is something, the right to flee to protect your life is a human right, and this means everyone should be allowed to enter another country to protect themselves. Okay? At this point, there are 6.9 million people across the globe who are defined as asylum seekers. And then refugee. So the actual definition of a refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin due to a well-founded, so this is where the definition is. Somebody else has decided that your fear of prosecution is well-founded for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or a political opinion. So that's 316 million individuals across the world today. That's a lot of people. So when you add up all those totals, right, what you see is the largest group are refugees, followed by the internally displaced individuals, followed by asylum seekers. So that's who is coming. Yeah, go ahead.
And refugees are recognized by UNHCR. That's how they get that status.
Exactly.
And this is excluding people who leave because of economic reasons.
They would be considered immigrants or migrants.
And asylum seekers, it used to be that you were expected to seek asylum in the first safe country you came to. which would usually be right next door to your own, you know, that is, that's how you sort of tell the difference between well, refugees recognized by UNHCR, but asylum seekers, whew, I've gotten out of Venezuela into Colombia, I'll seek asylum in Colombia.
I'm not as familiar with the history as you are. So, thank
Well,
you.
I think the pressures have kind of expanded the definition away from that historic.
Well, and because so many regions are involved,
Yeah.
right? So a whole region is involved in turmoil and moving from place to place, you may not be wanted anywhere and still be persecuted. So, you know, that definition has changed. But that's the definition of who are currently individuals who we're talking about when we're talking about people coming to our country. So one of the things that's really interesting, if you see this really crazy map here, there are many different pathways, right? So if you're looking at the top, this is where you're seeing on the left-hand side, that's where I'm living. And there's war going on and there's conflict. And then, as you were talking, the first country next door is the first country for asylum. But then there are different pathways that individuals take to the receiving country. And there's a lot that happens. Refugees are so vetted. It's unbelievable how many different paths that people have to take and how many different stops along the way where there are medical exams, interviews, there's just all this long involved process. People don't just become a refugee, show up in the United States. It takes years to actually make it to the United States. Some people have been born in refugee camps and then had their own children before they actually are received into their country of resettlement. So it's a very, very, very long and involved process. Refugee resettlement process is, I know it's very small here, but as I was saying, there's the refugee status is once it's determined through all those different kinds of interviews, medicals, all the legal screenings, all the background checks. Then once they're approved as a refugee and they're referred to the United States, they get another security clearance check, they do another in-person interview, then they get approved, then there's the presidential determination of where people are coming from and how many we will take. And then from there, there's another medical screening, and then they're matched with a sponsor agency. That's when one individual would be matched with HIAS. And then what would happen from there is there's another security clearance, and then another cultural orientation that happens before they even get to the United States. And then there's an airport check, and then they get here. So there's this long, long process. So even all that other slide with all that gobbledygook between one country and another country and all those different pathways, that all happens before this. So the individuals who come to the United States are highly screened. And then once they get here, what JF&CS is lucky enough to do, and a lot of times we do this in partnerships with community members like yourselves. So we have community sponsor groups that are a part of setting up homes, welcoming people at airports, getting backpacks for the kids, finding furnishings, setting up food, all these different things that happen. We get help from volunteers and people like yourselves. But once that case is assigned to us, the first thing we do, and one of the hardest things to accomplish, is finding people housing. Housing is so difficult to find right now for just all of us, right? Affordable housing is a challenge. If you have kids, grandkids, if you've got friends, family members, you know that crush that's happening with housing. Once we find a house, there's certain standards that they have to go by. They can't be basement apartments unless there's windows. There has to be a way out. There's lots of requirements that we are committed to doing to make sure that refugees are in safe housing that's on near grocery stores, on a bus line, so they're not isolated. We try to find housing close to other community members who come from the same nationalities, so that there is a sense of community, and people teach each other the tricks of the trade, how to get on a bus, how to get to the grocery store, how to use a debit card. And once we find that house in that community, on that bus line, then we start getting in the basic necessities: beds, dressers, tables, chairs, all the kitchen household wares that you know, once you move, all those things. And from there, then when we're ready to welcome them, we go to the airport and we greet them. And this is, a very emotional and beautiful experience to welcome people to the United States. Finally, after all that rigmarole, that they finally get here, they're so relieved and they're exhausted. And when we are putting them in the car, everything they own fits into the trunk of one car when you're looking at a family of 4. Imagine everything you own and 3 other people like you fitting into the trunk of a car. And that's all they have with them, that they brought with them from their countries of origin. We take them to their homes, and there, someone from their community we've asked to make a hot meal. So when they arrive, there's food that comes that's familiar to them. So that's comforting. Imagine some of the stories we get from refugee families who are coming with children and who are able to open the refrigerator and give their child, a mango. That's familiar fruit. That's comfort. That's something a child recognizes, right? It comes from their home. It feels like we cared enough to think about who they were and what they needed, right? So those little things matter. And that's where a lot of the volunteers and, our staff are such big-hearted people. We do this not because we're making a lot of money. We do this because we really care about the individuals. And we care about the safety that people deserve coming to this country, and we care about our community that is enriched by others who bring with them talents, skills, abilities, language, food, culture, all the wonderful things that come with immigration and with refugees. Once they're at the home and they've had their meal and we taught them, how to lock the door and bless them off to bed, they finally get their full night's sleep, and we come back the very next day within 24 hours, and we start with cultural orientation. How do you call 911, right? How do you know, one of the questions, we brought Syrian refugees into a parish house. They had very generously given us the opportunity to have refugee families come and stay there for short term until we could find them another house, and it was in Penn Hills. And I didn't think anything of it, but it was really close to a fire station, a volunteer fire station. So what do you hear in the middle of the night? And what does that sound like to refugees? Right? So coming there the next day with, a bag of crayons and paper and pencils, they are all just like, what is that noise mean? Right? And we hadn't thought, right, to explain what that was, or even to anticipate that that could be a challenge or a problem to them. So we start right away with cultural orientation. We start right away with getting them, and I know this is a little bit, some people feel feelings about this, but we need welfare benefits. Individuals who come here with no language, no credit history, no savings, no money at all, get welfare, and they qualify for medical assistance, food stamps, and cash assistance. Now, also, right away, we start referring them to employment, because our goal is within 90 days to have all the families who are able to work to start their jobs, their first jobs. And these often come from really wonderful employers. Employers who are willing to take the risk on someone who has very little English, but is very eager to work, who has no job history in the United States, no references, right? These employers are really special people. And we have some wonderful relationships with employers in our area who have over and over and over and over again hired, because these individuals are wonderful workers. They want to support their families. They want to make a life. They're finally safe. It's time to plant their roots and move on. We get everybody medical screenings. We start referring people to English language classes right away. We have English language classes that happen at JF&CS in our building. They go also downtown to our illiteracy partner, Illiteracy Pittsburgh, who has been incredible. We also place volunteers in people's homes to help them practice English, which is a wonderful thing. And we train volunteers to use tools to help with that conversational English. We also are working with the children at the same time. We're enrolling them in school, we're getting them medical screenings, they're seeing dentists, all of this stuff is happening very, very quickly within the first 90 days. They're also enrolled in our Bridge Builders program, where our youth services workers start working with the kids and helping them understand what school is and what homework is and what's a backpack and all those kinds of things that may be new to the children, because our educational system is very different. We're also placing a mentor in the home to work with the children to help them, because the kids want to be like all the other kids. They really get upset when they don't get their homework done, because they can see that everybody else is pulling that stuff out of their backpack and handing it in, and the teacher smiles. And when the teacher comes to them and not smiling because they don't have that piece of paper, that's really upsetting to them. That stigmatizes them. So helping them achieve those kind of goals of doing their homework, that means a lot to these kids and to the parents as well. We all know that our families are only as strong as the person who's suffering the most, right? And if your kids are struggling, you're struggling. So that's why we wrap support around the children in particular. And then once all these things are happening, we do another home visit in 30 days. The kids are enrolled in school, they're connected to their community members, and they keep calling us, texting us for any kinds of things that they need. There's all kinds of wonderful stories. I'm just going to tell you one. But with cultural orientation comes bus training. Some of the individuals who come to us are pre-literate, so they don't recognize any abstract, they don't know what a number or a letter is because they have not learned written language. So teaching someone who's pre-literate to ride a bus, pretty tricky. So we've come up with all kinds of ways to do that. And one of the ways was, matching. So if I see 61A on my phone, on a piece of paper, I can match it to the symbols that are on the bus, right? So one mother was here with 2 children, and she had to get to the offices at JF&CS. And she knew our name was Jewish Family and Community Services, so she knew that. And we had a volunteer surreptitiously follow to make sure she didn't get lost, right? So the volunteer was behind her, she was matching, and she got on the bus and she said to the bus driver, 61 Jewish? And he said, yeah, 61 Jewish. So we find ways, and people who have come here are so creative, so resilient, so determined to find a way. If they made it through all that mishigas, all that craziness that they had to navigate, they're going to find a way to use the bus, right? That's the least of their worries. But we stay connected to them throughout time, just continuing to help them with a variety of things. So JF&CS, like I said, we're helping people find buses. We're helping people have the food that's familiar to them. When all the refugees came from Afghanistan, one of the things that our staff was just exhausted because people were showing up with no notice whatsoever. Usually we get, in the good old days we used to get 6 to 8 weeks. Now we might get 4, but during the Afghanistan crisis, we would sometimes get people just showing up at the airport with no notice at all, or 24 hours. Yes?
And you should point out that why this is happening to you, because the US government is officially accepting people. It's under pressure to take people in. It set up the United Nations. Part of the United Nations is resettling refugees. So it has to tell the United Nations, yes, we're going to take in people. We're going to take in at least this many. And so the UN is then, there's a huge office in the State Department that is handling the UN-US relationship. And then they turn around and are working with you. And another bit of history, you know, good old days of the Hungarian Revolution, the US government was giving the refugees like a year of benefits.
Oh,
Yeah,
gone are those days.
right. So the people. So what now? All these 10 organizations across the United States, or somebody in the State Department brings up, we've got 20 Bantu coming to your town. They're going to give some money to the local organization, but not.
So this is a very interesting fact. So the money that comes that follows a refugee into this country, we get definitely not enough money to do the work. But the refugee family also gets about $1,100 a head. So if I showed up here with my 3 kids and my spouse, the 5 of us, we'd have about, do the math, right? $5,500. And that has to pay for your first and last month's rent. It has to pay for any furnishings, any clothing that you may need. It has to pay for everything until you get a job. Can you imagine your first 90 days and that's all you have? That's not enough money, for sure. And the US government, while they fly people here, refugees become indebted to the United States for that airplane fare. So if I show up with me and my 3 kids and my spouse from Afghanistan or Congo or anywhere else in the world, I have to pay back that plane fare within 5 years. And can you imagine that? Right? So the challenges that refugees have are enormous, and there are many different ways that we try to help them. We have special programs for highly vulnerable individuals. These kinds of programs work for people who are single parents or people with a physical challenge or an invisible disability, or they may be too old to work, or there may be other challenges and barriers that need to be addressed prior to their getting a job and being independent. And so we have special kinds of programs that help them. Then we also have special programs that incentivize you finding a job quickly. We'll pay, there's a program called Match Grant that allows us to pay for half of someone's, to pay for rent for someone on an ongoing basis while they're working, right? But guess what? We only get that money if we can match it from donations, from external sources. So that's another way you can help resettle refugees, by us being able to do that kind of work. The other thing that we do have that's important to note is that there are special groups of people who are coming to the United States now that have a particular designation that's a little bit different than refugee. Some of those individuals are called SIVs, which is a special immigrant visa. These are usually given to people who have worked with the United States. When we had the crisis in Afghanistan, a lot of those individuals got SIV status, special immigrant visas, because they worked in the US Embassy or they worked for the US military, and so they were given special status to come very quickly. There's also a whole other groups of people who are now receiving something called humanitarian visas. They have a weird name. It sounds strange. It's called asylum, well, no, sorry, never asylum. They're called parolees. Okay, that sounds strange. When we hear parole, we think someone who is in jail. No, these are humanitarian parolees. And for instance, right now, what we're seeing is humanitarian parole status. I call it a humanitarian status, forget the word parole because it confuses people, is going to people from Haiti. So they're allowed to come, not as refugees, but with this special humanitarian visa. People from Cuba, special humanitarian visa. Guatemala, Ukraine, special humanitarian visa that allows people to come to this country and work, and to evade the persecution and the war that's happening and the instability that's happening in that country without going through the refugee status process. But it's limited. It's usually only for 18 to 24 months. It can be renewed, but this is a whole new group of people that we are also working with. It's an interesting change in how the government is choosing to work with individuals who are facing persecution and challenges in their home countries. So, why do we do this? Of course, it's humanitarian. Of course, it's because people are fleeing danger. But also, we receive a lot of benefit from integration through refugees and immigrants. Of course, there's the economic impacts. You know, who built this country? Who built the steel mills? Who worked in the steel mills? Immigrants. We're all immigrants. None of us were, you know, who was here first? It was the natives, Native Americans. So right now, immigrants continue to contribute to our economy as wage earners. I wish I had the statistic in my head, but the growth in Allegheny County from immigrants and refugees is one of the biggest pieces of growth in Allegheny County, which has been seeing a lot of decrease in population. This is a good thing. It's bringing in new money. It's increasing the tax base. It's filling crucial gaps in lots of industries such as healthcare. We're seeing a lot of people who are also agriculture, construction. These are areas where we cannot find people to work, and we're finding a lot of people who are finding their place and contributing to our community through those kinds of jobs. Also, of course, immigrants and refugees bring us lots of different perspectives. We're learning a lot about ourselves through their eyes. We're learning about our funny, quirky ways. We're learning about ways in which we need to change and grow to be more welcoming, to be aware of our own prejudices and our own blinders that we wear. They bring traditions, cuisines, they bring dances, they bring so much color to American culture. And then through schools and neighborhoods and all kinds of different organizations, enrich our lives in so many different ways. Our kids have an entirely different perspective on who the world is and who the United States is, right? Through the richness of people coming from around the world and into our communities, right? I grew up in a community that was pretty much all white, right? And that's not true of where I grew up anymore. It's very much a different place, and that's a good and vibrant and wonderful thing. And that you can be involved in this. One of the things that different organizations have been involved in terms of community groups, faith-based organization, is community sponsorship. And community sponsorship is when a group of individuals come together, 8, 10, 12 people, and they say, we are going to work alongside you in resettling Dana and her 3 kids and her spouse. And we're going to help you find an apartment. And we're going to do a fundraiser, and we're going to help furnish, and we're going to set up the rooms, and the bedspreads are going to be cute for the kids, and all those different kinds of things. And then introducing refugees to our world, helping them navigate, becoming kind of their right-hand person in navigating this new world and this new culture. We do have community sponsorship groups here in Squirrel Hill that have been really, really ongoing. I think Dor Hadash, the congregation Dor Hadash, has had 3 different families that they have helped resettle. And it's been an incredible experience for us I hope it's been just as good an experience for Dor Hadash, although I know it's hard sometimes. But it's been an incredible experience for those families. Those families get a benefit that other families do not. Those kids with community sponsors get to go to camp. Those kids with community sponsors are enrolled in sports programs. We can't do all of that, right, for every refugee. But when we come alongside community sponsors, we can do it together. So we enrich their lives as we work alongside community. And you know, immigrants and refugees often settle in areas with shrinking populations. They stabilize communities. The largest group of new home buyers in the Baldwin-Whitehall area, Bhutanese refugees, right? And so increasing housing prices because there's a higher demand, increasing the tax base, right? So there's a lot that's to be said for stabilizing our communities and making our world a richer place. So there's lots of ways to support our work. One-time options, of course. You could do a drive to furnish a kitchen. You could get involved as community sponsors. Mentoring, I talked about that a number of different times. We also need mentors who help people navigate jobs, like job kind of mentors. Practice interviewing skills. Reaching out to elected officials to continue to encourage our community to be more welcoming in different ways. One of the things that's happening right now that's so important is a lot of the schools in Pittsburgh Public School, they're trying to shrink how many schools there are. There are 31 that are on the chopping block. A lot of them are our English as second language hubs. How? Why? Right? We need to be the advocates for people who cannot and don't know this is happening to them. Right? We actually, one of our staff actually wrote to the school district and said, look, you're sending all these invitations to parents to come and talk about why they shouldn't close their school. You're sending them out in English. How are any of the refugee families going to know that they need to show up too? And of course, connecting us with homes. Landlords, one of the biggest challenges we have is finding places where people can live. Because there are no credit checks, right? There is no landlord history. So helping us find homes, helping us find new employers, helping us just make Pittsburgh as welcoming as we can for these individuals who have endured so much to come and make a new life here in our safe community. So we thank you. I thank you for inviting me here. I talked really fast. I said a lot of stuff. I think we have like a few minutes for questions if anybody has any. But thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
And then, I was just gonna say, whenever you get a question, can you repeat it into the microphone for our Zoom viewers to hear?
Sure, I will do that. Tony, did you have a question?
Well, so many opportunities for volunteering, and I'm thinking of family members and friends who want to get involved in ways like this. Do you just invite people to come in and talk to you?
So we have volunteer coordinators in each of our departments, and then we have a community outreach coordinator, Christy Laniers. And if you go onto our website, you can find a way to volunteer, and I did exactly what you told me not to do. I didn't repeat the question. He was asking how can people find out how to volunteer. But come to our website, go to volunteer in the search box, go to the bottom, you'll see volunteer, and there are all kinds of opportunities that you'll be able to see there. And we'll connect you to the right person. Go ahead.
Just as an observation, all the work that you do is greatly appreciated. My wife helps out with the organization. She was a bus rider with an immigrant family, and just getting them to know which bus to take, where to get off, the times and all that. She did that a number of times with this family. And anyway, one question: do they get free bus passes, or do they have a paid thing for that?
So we have to pay for bus passes. We were talking about transportation here. He's talking about how his wife was a volunteer to help refugee families navigate the bus system. It's a lot of fun. and it's a little bit stressful.
Yeah.
But it's so important to have someone friendly you can rely on.
And she does bring up the fact that there are discussions about finding furniture, finding
Yep.
clothing, finding a residence.
We're always looking for help with furnishings, clothing, residences, jobs.
Right.
Yes. Go ahead.
Now, what percentage of the people we help are residents of Squirrel Hill, and what percentage live outside the neighborhood?
So the question was whether or not we settle a lot of people here in Squirrel Hill. What do you guess?
No.
No. Why?
Housing.
Housing is too expensive in Squirrel Hill. We used to resettle a lot of families in Squirrel Hill, and in fact, there are still large groups of Russian speakers who live in the area, live in Homestead, some of the high rises, but we can't afford really to have people live here. Other questions? Go ahead.
This is a kind of a facetious question, but in the 8 years that you've worked with this immigrant population, how many of them have turned out to be thieves and rapists and murderers?
Oh, very, 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 very few individuals are ever convicted of a crime or commit crimes. One of the reasons why is if you get a record while you are a refugee, you won't get citizenship. It will be very difficult for you to remain in the United States. So people are highly motivated to stay on the right side of the law. And so she did say this is a facetious question, but very few of the individuals who come to this country as refugees ever commit crimes.
Dana, what about the folks who are coming over the southern border and don't have any vetting at all up to that point?
Right, so there's a lot of people coming across the southern border for lots and lots of reasons. I want to tell you though, they're not just coming from Mexico and Central and South America. Right now, people are coming across the southern border from China, from Ukraine, from Haiti, from all Congo. They're coming from all over the world because they can get a ticket to go to Mexico and then they can cross the border and ask for asylum. But it's very difficult to cross anywhere else. And so we do have a lot of people from around the world coming from across, but they're coming, it is such a complex challenge what's happening in the southern border. And I don't want to give opinions at all, but individuals coming across from the southern border, we also help with our program called Immigrant Services and Connections. And Immigrant Services and Connections helps individuals who have a barrier to finding the resources they need due to culture or language. And we help them navigate ways to find places to live, legal work, pathways to citizenship the same way. But yeah, we have a challenge to figure out. You had a question here.
Those refugee camps that people stay in for years, are they forced into them, or do they voluntarily go to them?
So refugee camps, do people voluntarily go there or are they forced there? That's a really good question, and it depends. I can't speak with any certainty about every refugee camp, but a lot of people move to refugee camps because they are safe. Other refugees move there because they're still being persecuted by the community in which they live. They're still not welcome. And so there's a lot of sequestering of individuals in refugee camps in order to control that population as well, which is a fact. But sometimes it's safety, sometimes it's what they can, where they're allowed to live. One final question from anyone?
I was curious, I'm sort of back to the southern border.
Mm-hmm.
But you hear once in a while in the news of the government just loading them up on a plane or a bus and dumping them in a city. That's what it sounds like they're saying. Have you experienced that? Well, Pittsburgh had people
No.
in a situation you make it sound very positive. What you've said has been very positive all evening, which was great. But that's not the impression I get on what's happening with a lot of people at the southern border. I mean, they're going through nothing other than, I'm not saying it's easy, they somehow make it to the border, yeah, but they just make it, yeah,
Mhm.
and cross. It's that simple.
Well, it's not simple. It's a very arduous,
I mean,
deathly
I'm not saying what they
journey.
did was simple. I
Right.
just said my two statements are simple. They
Right.
somehow get there,
Right.
yeah.
So people who come across the southern border are not being flown there by the government. What's happening is that some of the governors in Texas are flying people from the border to Chicago, New York, and other places in order to share, as they see it, the burden of caring for and helping immigrants who are coming without invitation, who are looking for asylum. And so, like I said, it's a very complex process. I do not pretend to have an answer at all. I don't have a solution to that. I think the thing that I try to understand from what's happening in the southern border is, and this is a quote, and I'm going to massacre the quote, but no one leaves their home if their home isn't on fire. No one climbs into a leaky boat or combs through a jungle or crosses deserts unless there's a desperate reason to leave home. We wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. And it's an important thing to remember. No one's leaving because it's really nice back there. And I just want to come move in the United States. And I think also, we're, as human beings, afraid of things that are different. We're curious about them, but it's the same kind of thing. Things that are different, kind of, what is that? We look at it. What is that? What is that flower? What is that bug? What is that? Whatever it is that's different. We're attracted, but we're also confused by it. And until we can make sense, and until we can understand that it's not threatening, we're going to be kind of disturbed. Good disturbed and bad disturbed. But we're going to be riled up. So it's just part of human nature, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it's how we learn.
Okay, folks, let us thank Dana. Further,